We're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the People's COVID-19 briefing. My name is David Cisneros, and I'm a faculty member in the communication department at U of I, as well as the president of the Campus Faculty Association. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So I'm going to talk just very briefly about sort of the thought behind this event and sort of the structure, and then turn it over to the folks who will be sharing their stories today. So here we are, 18 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, an unprecedented moment that has claimed countless people and has overturned all of our lives to some degree. And at the University of Illinois, students, instructors, researchers, and staff have been forced to find ways to continue our work through all of the challenges and tragedies of the pandemic and its impact on this community. The People's COVID-19 briefing is an opportunity for the members of the U of I community, teachers, graduate students, instructors, faculty, undergraduate students. It's an opportunity for all of us to share our stories of challenges and of perseverance throughout the last 18 months. Unlike the more regular COVID-19 briefing series by the university administration, we'll be hearing today from members of the community who are on the front lines of teaching and learning and researching during the COVID-19 pandemic. These include instructors and students, faculty, grad students, and undergraduates, as I said. And our hope is that this event will provide an opportunity to share stories and experiences and to get a new perspective on life at the U of I during the COVID pandemic, and to find ways to work together to keep this community safe while continuing to pursue the university's mission as a learning community. So for the first 25 minutes or so, we'll hear short testimonials from a series of speakers that I'll introduce one by one. Then we'll have a few minutes for members of the media to ask questions. We ask that members of the media introduce themselves in the chat when you ask your question. And finally, we'll be opening up the floor for participants to share their own stories and experiences. I'll note that if you haven't noticed already, the meeting is being recorded, and that there is, as you can see at the top of your screen, live transcription is enabled. All you have to do is click that message. I also should note that the provost and chancellor were invited to this event, but were not able to attend. The provost did note that, quote, "Though we are not able to attend, we remain committed to the issues you are discussing and to the health and safety of our campus community." One final thing is, periodically you'll see messages in the chat about how you can get involved in efforts to improve campus and community safety. And so watch out for those. There'll be links that you can click. So thanks again, everyone, for attending, for your commitment to the U of I and our Urbana-Champaign communities. And thanks also to the organizing group that put this together, with members from the Campus Faculty Association, the Graduate Employees Organization, and the Non-Tenure Faculty Coalition. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker. And as I said, I'll call on folks throughout one by one and let folks sort of introduce themselves more. So our first speaker is Peter Fritchie from the History Department.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for organizing it. I'm first because I have to go teach now. I got COVID. Vaccinated. My wife and I were both vaccinated. We all got COVID. Kids got COVID. Took 2 weeks. Very debilitating. And I'm still tired. I can cook and clean and take care of the children, and I can take care of my teaching. But I would say my research productivity is down to 20%, maybe even less. And I'm beat. I'm tired. I immediately went on Zoom for 2 weeks and experienced the advantages and disadvantages that I had done all last year. And then I went back into the classroom. I feel that the university should be more sensitive to the people who are trying to protect their health and the health of those around them. And we did not invent Zoom. And we didn't put ourselves on Zoom last year. And I think that there's a kind of parsimoniousness in the university's attitude towards its faculty and instructors when it comes to thinking about Zoom, thinking about the classroom. It's the instructors and the students who know best, and they should be listened to. So those are my views. Try not to get COVID. And I was even given monoclonal at Carl. So yeah, that's that. Trying to feel better. And I have to now go teach, but I wish you best in this people's forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for
Ciao, ciao.
squeezing this in. Next, we'll turn it over to Mark Hertzman, also from history.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you so much, Peter, who I know is gone. I'm also in the history department. I'm also a parent of an unvaccinated child, and the pressure daily of going to campus and having that going on is pretty intense. But I want to talk sort of about bigger picture, and I want to start, by saying that I and everybody here appreciates deeply the pressures and challenges that administrators are facing this year. We depend on the university, and the university depends on us. And the provost, the chancellor, and the president, I think, really need to start engaging more equitably and realistically in this relationship. And I want to make two quick points to illustrate that. So first, there's a larger context shaping this year that the administration, I think, sometimes forgets. As Peter just said, I mean, very clearly, and it's not just for folks who got COVID, most of us are demoralized and exhausted just from last year. And this year, instead of getting meaningful material support or creative thinking to address and help us get through this year, I wanted to think about having my class outside, but no administrative help for that. And down the line, instead, we just get kind of this victory tour, handing out medals, and as if the pandemic is over. It's also important to note, I was a director of undergrad studies for 3 years. This also echoes a little what Peter was saying. When I was DUS, all I heard was make your classes bigger, put them online. And so it's no wonder that now when we hear suddenly in-person instruction has magically become the lifeblood of the institution, well, it's hard to take that seriously coming from this administration. Now, the second point, so that's context, and now to close and move towards closing. The second point I want to make is that the pandemic affects people differently depending on identity and place in the university. I think this is kind of an obvious point, but another one that's clearly forgotten. So two quick examples here. We had a forum in the history department. A female TA said that on the first day of class, she tried to check boarding passes and her students basically revolted. And you can imagine how that's going to affect her authority in the classroom, student evals, and on down the line. A white male TA offered that he had a quite different experience. The current policy, what's in place, is all right for some and leaves others totally out to dry. Final thing, another example, this one's from engineering. So there's a team of TAs in engineering this semester. One got COVID and had to miss a month of teaching. What happened? What always happens, the other TAs rallied together, did extra unpaid work, and carried not just their colleague, but also the supervising professor and the students in the course. And we learned about this from a female religious minority TA. What's especially infuriating here is how the administration in bargaining takes advantage of the support that TAs show each other to present a rosy picture about working conditions and then effectively take credit for, in this and many other cases, the labor of others. To close, I want to say that we are all in this together, but the provost, chancellor, and president have to find a way to address this, to address the unfair and uneven impact that the pandemic has already had, compounded now on a daily basis by the victory tour mentality that leaves way too many instructors overburdened and burned out to begin with, to fend for ourselves. And that's
Thank
it.
you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks. Thanks. Let me turn it over now to Amanda Bales from English.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you all for coming out. I'm Amanda Bales. I'm a senior lecturer in the English department and vice president of the Non-Tenure Faculty Coalition. We represent all full-time non-tenure track faculty at UIUC, often referred to as specialized faculty. So, this is just for the people who are maybe confused or don't know how like these different hierarchies work. So these are, for example, teaching assistant professor or clinical associate professor or lecturer. Like these are some of the titles that you'll hear whom we represent. So speaking about, uneven impact, like to sort of begin with tenure-line faculty in the CFA, to then understand how specialized faculty or non-tenure track faculty are positioned differently on campus. Tenure is partially meant, it's not the whole thing, but partially meant to provide protection for professors from administrative overreach. So things like requiring faculty to teach extra classes with no compensation, or asking them to take on large administrative duties without course releases or compensation, or telling them what they can or cannot teach, or ending their employment with no formal review process. Like, those are some of the things that tenure is meant to protect professors from. Without tenure, people in the non-tenure track faculty lines, we have this union, we have the Non-Tenure Track Faculty Association, and these are some of the real life examples right here at UIUC that we've been working with over time to try some of the working conditions that we've been trying to address. With COVID, we have additional exploitative working conditions that we are trying to, or in which we are trying to intervene, including removing specialized faculty input on teaching modality, ignoring classroom safety concerns, punting on concerns over evaluation, and refusing to offer any additional compensation or relief for the many additional hours of labor it is taking in order to keep classes going. So now we have some direct statements that speak to these things that I've just laid out for you. I think it's also going to be a fairly nice transition into what GEO is going to bring up. So a lot of the members either couldn't be here, or the members who wanted to speak either couldn't be here, or they wanted to remain anonymous for a lot of the reasons that I just put out. They don't have the same kinds of protections as tenure-line faculty. We have our union, but they themselves, they might be on a one-year contract that can get non-renewed, AKA fired. So they wanted to remain anonymous, but I do want to, speak their words for them and let them be heard. So, from a member in LAS, I feel unsafe and overworked heading into the spring semester. My department typically asks for teaching preferences and discusses modalities and capacities ahead of the scheduling process, but this did not happen for spring 2022. I think it's dangerous to put 150 students or more in a room with immediately adjacent seats. While most lecture halls would allow them to be at least 6 feet from students, I think it is unfair to enforce social distancing for myself while students are stuck in close quarters. Additionally, with no guarantee that the mask mandate will continue, I feel unsafe teaching large lectures in person at such capacity. And from a member in the College of Agricultural, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences, I went round and round with McKinley and CCPHD when I had a student email me that she tested positive for COVID-19. I was not allowed to tell students in my class. This should not happen. When we sit next to someone 2 days before they test positive, I think we all need to know. The response was always that it would compromise the privacy of the student. The student was absent for 10 days and then returned to class. I never heard from anyone other than the student. Neither the students nor I were contacted by anyone about being in contact with someone who tested positive. The university is leaving it all up to the health department. Both the health department and McKinley told me that they are overwhelmed and did not have enough contact tracing people. So I think that this statement, or these statements, I should say, highlight a few things. The fear and the overwork, and also that a lot of the concerns that we have are also directly related to the learning conditions of our students. Our working conditions are our students' learning conditions, and that is an incredibly important piece that seems to be missing from the way that the university is currently handling their COVID protocol. And that's what I have, David, if you want to.
Wow, thank you so much, Amanda. Wow, okay. We have a couple of statements from graduate students. We have a statement by Issy Marquez that's going to be read by Leslie, right? Leslie
Yes.
Collins.
No, actually, I'm here. I can read it.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
great.
Yeah, I have another meeting at 1, but I'm actually here, so I can do it. Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Leslie, and thank you everyone for being here. Hi, everyone. My name is Issy Marquez, and I'm a first-year master's student in literary studies. I'm actually a very recent graduate of the University of Illinois as undergrad, so I've quickly seen the turnaround in treatment from being an undergraduate to a graduate student here. And I know that turnaround is rooted in issues of power, money, labor. Within the first few weeks of the semester, I was formally denied my request to conduct my class online. I cited both family and medical reasons, and I was still denied the choice to protect myself and my students. I was and still am afraid of exposure in my classroom. I have a class of 19 students, 20 people if you count me, in a small room that doesn't allow for social distancing or window ventilation. Since the start of the semester, I've had my State for Illinois app has only been checked once in the front of the English building, meaning my students have only had their app checked once by a wellness ambassador. I personally check it before every class as a way to increase comfortability in the classroom, but our students are very smart people, and they know that is not a foolproof system. Just 2 weeks ago, I had 6 students missing from one class. In the same week, I had about 4 to 5 students visibly sick in that class that had to continue excusing themselves to deal with their illness. And I actually hold another role on campus. I am a resident director of a nearby residence hall. So I understand it is my role in that duty to be an essential worker for the living accommodations of my residents. They need a comfortable roof over their head, and it's part of my duty to fulfill that. It is their human right. But as a graduate teaching assistant, it is not my position to risk my life and the lives of others by forcibly conducting class when I or my students are not doing well, especially when there are suitable, well-prepared opportunities to utilize online structures when necessary. It is in my best interest and my students' best interest when we're able to collaborate together for the well-being and trajectory of our course, not when we're struck down and mandated to follow policies that dehumanize us. Our students and we are people first, and we deserve a choice, and we cannot perform at our best when our health and well-being is compromised. Neither can our students. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We next have Bren Hayes from English.
Hello. I am also a first-year master's student in literary studies, and on my very first day of teaching, my very first day on campus this semester, I was exposed to COVID in my classroom. As has been said by others who've spoken today, the only notification I received was from the person who had tested positive. I was never told by the university or by public health that I had been exposed, nor were any of my students. Upon learning of the exposure, I canceled the next day of class, having received no prior guidance as to how to handle these situations, and was told that and again, to repeat those who have spoken before me, I was told that I should not say anything about my students' health status, nor should I move class online in the case of an exposure. I have talked with my students numerous times about how to handle our safety this semester, and my students, the majority of my students agreed that they would prefer to hold class online. I have had students miss multiple weeks of class, either due to quarantine, other illness, or other issues, or just a fear of showing up in the classroom because of COVID. And between having students who are unable to come to class, having students who are afraid, and between that and their explicit statement that they would prefer to be taught online, I see no reason why I should not be allowed to teach online. We all know that online teaching does have its drawbacks, but in this situation, the quality of instruction would undoubtedly be better if I was just allowed to take my class online. And of course, the more important part of that is that me and my students would be safer if that were allowed to be the case. That's what I have to say.
Thank you so much. We have a statement from Chelsea Birchmeyer, which is, I think, going to be read by Leslie, if I'm right this time.
Yes. Chelsea, you're not here? Okay, yeah. I think she's teaching during this time, which is why she couldn't be here. My name is Chelsea Birchmeyer, and I'm a teaching assistant in the psychology department. I can't be at the briefing today because I'm teaching class. Here's what happens in my class on a typical day. First, I have to set up Zoom to allow students who are isolating due to COVID or waiting on a COVID test to attend class virtually. There are often many technical difficulties with this on the classroom PC that slow down my class. Because we don't get exposure notifications, I then am expected to log into self-service and check if any students have excused absences. Then I'm supposed to check building access status for 80 students. 80 students every single class. It is not only unsafe for grad workers and students to be exposed when standing close to one another in an enclosed classroom space while checking the building status, it is a violation of our contract, our GEO contract, to shift our responsibilities from teaching and education to health and safety inspectors. Finally, our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. The time that we are expected to spend checking students' building access status is time that we should be spending providing quality education for our students. I brought up these concerns at GEO's COVID-19 impact bargaining session that happened a couple of weeks ago. When I brought it up, there had not been a single wellness support associate or WSA at any time in my building during my class. I told the admin that it seems like these policies were designed by someone who had never had to teach in a classroom, and I asked them, do you really think it's feasible and acceptable for TAs to take time out of our contract mandated responsibilities to check student building status? The response was that the individual TA should request a WSA in their building if they need one. So after I brought it up at the session, WSA started sporadically appearing at my building. But that's not acceptable, because for every WSA that is added to a building for an individual TA who expresses their concern, a WSA is taken away from another building that needs that staff. Admin have admitted that they have only been able to hire 330 to 350 wellness support associates when they would need 3,000 to staff all of the buildings and actually keep our buildings safe. UIUC has the resources to either pay WSAs a living wage and benefits to incentivize them to work a hazardous job, or to create an alternative system that does not rely on TAs engaging in unsafe, non-contract mandated building status checking responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that was the last, well, of our testimonial. So I think we're turning it back to you, Leslie.
Oh, we have one more person, Elias.
I'm sorry, Elias.
No worries. Yeah, my name's Elias Decker. I'm an undergraduate, senior. I'm studying linguistics and history. On the first day of school, I actually got COVID. And in writing my emails to my professors, I said something along the lines of, by the way, I'm sure you already have found out, but I tested positive for COVID. Frankly, just to try and build some rapport with my professors early on in the semester, and not have them rely on what I assumed was a pretty robust system for communicating if their student got COVID. Every single one of them replied to me, I had no idea. Thank you for letting me know. And that was pretty jarring to find out. And the failure of communication, or rather the failure for the university to have implemented systems for communications, made all the more clear by the way that last year the university took many proactive steps and established many proactive protocols for online classes, for regular testing, etc. We know that the university has the willpower when it wants to, and we certainly know that the university has the money, both at hand and in reserves. I wanted to also corroborate everything everybody has been saying about the failure of the Safer Illinois status phone checking. Despite almost all of my classes being in person, my phone has been checked 4 times. The 4th one was about an hour and a half ago when I went to my class this morning. In my experience in the larger buildings, and I'm only, I say only, I'm only an LAS, so I don't even experience the massive classes of 700 people. But even in the relatively larger buildings like Lincoln Hall, what happens is 5 students enter at a time. 1 is asked to check, the other 4 just go to their class. In fact, one of my friends is actually one of those ambassadors, one of those phone checkers. And in just my conversations with him, he's expressed that the university saying that they are addressing the situation via this mechanism is nominal at best, and sometimes not even that. But my experiences overall have corroborated everything everybody else has said, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Elias, for sharing your experiences. So now I'll turn it back over to Leslie Owens from English.
Hi, thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. I'm going to read a statement on behalf of the Graduate Employees Organization, which is the union for grad workers on this campus. Like I said, my name is Leslie Owens. I'm actually one of the 2 co-presidents of the GEO this year, and I'm also a member of GEO's COVID-19 impact bargaining team. So basically, whenever our working conditions change, we have an opportunity to bargain that with the administration. When COVID-19 hit, we started the bargaining process a year and a half ago. The community member stories you've heard here today show what GEO has heard loud and clear from our membership. Teaching on campus is not safe. Once again, the university administration has chosen to prioritize public relations and tuition money over our instructor and student lives. In GEO's bargaining session with the administration on September 24th, the university's representatives refused to bargain any of our requests. They repeatedly called the students we teach clients and clientele and told us it was okay for instructors to do a worse job as teachers as we manage the multiple sources of overwork stemming from the university administration's policies. And they blatantly ignored the complaints of the 80 workers and students who gathered to protest our treatment at the Henry Administration Building on September 23rd. We are asking those of you here today to use the email template linked in the chat to tell university administrators that our students are not clients, they are our community. And every member of our community, from students to teachers to staff, deserves safety and transparency during this pandemic. The GEO has been bargaining for quite a few things during impact bargaining, but these are the things we are asking for right now. And we believe that they will benefit pretty much everybody who is experiencing these sorts of exposures. So the GEO calls for the following. 1, an enrollment-based notification system, meaning a notification system based on what classes a student is enrolled in person, an enrollment-based notification system that tells everyone in an in-person class when someone in that class tests positive, as a way to reduce the spread of COVID-19 breakthrough infections in our classrooms. 2, worker choice, so that all workers can choose whether to work online, in a hybrid modality, or in person. 3, solving the chronic lack of wellness support associates checking building access at our building doors. This work should not be done by instructors, as we've heard in testimonials today, and it should be done before anyone comes into the building. 4, we need to stop instructor overwork or compensate us for that overwork, and provide at least 2 weeks of advance notice if the university needs to move classes online. 5, provide high quality masks for all instructors to protect ourselves and others in our classrooms. As far as I know, the university has offered no masks to employees. Some departments have done this, but my department only did it after getting a lot of pressure from workers. And 6, provide all instructors with the technology we need to do our job so that we don't use our personal computers and technology to teach. Please join us today in making these demands to the administration. Our voices are loudest when we speak together. We'd now like to open the floor to questions from the media before we move into open discussion. So I'll turn it back over to David.
Thank you, Leslie. We have one question in the chat, and we may have others that media may want to type or speak. But the first question is from, so I'm sorry if I mispronounced this name, Francie Dieppe from the Chronicle of Higher Education. I'm just going to go ahead and read the question here. And hi, I'm a reporter at the Chronicle of Higher Ed. Within higher ed, UIUC has a reputation for having strict, thorough coronavirus rules. Do you feel that reputation is warranted? Would any of our speakers like to talk about that?
I'd be.
Hi. Okay, I'll go after Mark.
Are you sure? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the question. And I'd answer it sort of this way. I think it was borne out in a lot of the testimonials. There is a big difference, I think, for a lot of us between last year and this year. And the News Gazette, a local paper, also reported on this, the issue of the building monitors, it's not working. So basically, like, no, we don't think the reputation is warranted this year. We think that they've sort of let go of things. The New York Times there was a fairly celebratory article in the New York Times about precisely that reputation. And one of the things that I think the chancellor said, or that was noted, was it was before the semester, students will be barred from buildings if they don't, if they don't test. And the reality is this, building monitoring thing is a joke. And the final thing I'll just say is that, last year there was a lot of pressure on faculty, instructors, put your courses in person, right? And we totally understand that students want to teach in person. We want to teach in person. I mean, this is what we want to do. And then we got an email from the provost in the fall, right before classes started, that said, because so many of you are teaching in person, we don't have the resources to man the doors enough. And so, it's basically out of our hands, as if it was like we had done this. So really, I think, at least for me, and I think a lot of others, it felt like a big bait and switch, that there were things in place last year that aren't this year. Leslie, and I'm sure others want to add. Yeah.
Yes, I would definitely second that. Something that the GEO has been struggling with is that we've had multiple instances of graduate workers who have basically made mistakes that were bureaucratic, missing an email, missing sort of one testing thing. So what happened a lot last year is that we would get one student who was receiving this sort of outsized punishment. So the university was often using surveillance to kind of make a show that they were keeping us safe, but that was mostly through punishing individual actions. But when it comes to actually creating policies that keep us safe and enforcing them, I think that the university, especially this year, is just depending on the fact that only 7% of campus is testing on any given day, which means 93% of campus is walking around without necessarily knowing if they're having a breakthrough infection. So it keeps the numbers low, but basically they're hoping that nobody mentions anything, and they're hoping
Sorry, really quickly, I was like not caught up in my notes. Will you say that sort of last sentence again? What you were talking about?
Oh, yes. About 7% of people are testing every day. So out of the 50,000 plus folks on campus, it's about 3,500, which means 93% of people don't know if they might be carrying an infection into their classrooms. So I think that the university is sort of expecting us to take a lot of risk without actually taking responsibility for the long-term side effects of getting COVID and potentially even dying from this illness.
Thank you, Leslie and Mark. I guess one other thing to say to your question, Francie, is that we don't necessarily view this as a competition between universities or between their workers and us as workers. We're just trying to talk about our experiences and our working conditions. So we hope our colleagues at other universities can also push their administration to worry about, what's actually safe and how they can improve their working conditions. But we're focusing on how the University of Illinois can improve the conditions for members of our community and maybe continue to lead the nation by ensuring safety in the ways that we've talked about today. So we've got, I see Bruce Rosenstock wants to share something. I've also got one more question, another question from a journalist. So let's tackle that and then we'll come to your comment, Bruce. Is that all right? Yeah.
It addresses some of the questions that have been just raised, but
okay. Let's
allow the journalists to ask their questions.
Thanks. I've got, okay. I'm sorry if I'm, okay. This is from Willie at the Daily Illini. When it comes to modality changes, this question is for Bruce, I see. I know that Professor Rosenstock attempted to introduce a UI Senate resolution about allowing instructors more authority to switch online. It has since been referred to Ed Paul, and they referred it to the provost. Do you think the UI Senate has the power to address the issues with modalities? And if anything could come out of the UI Senate on the matter? So I see now why you're raising your hand, Bruce. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And this does address issues concerning how the reputation of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign has perhaps been overestimated in relation to our response to the COVID threat and safety of students and faculty on campus, and all the instructors, in-person instructors. So I raised a resolution that ultimately will be presented at the next Senate meeting, which is coming up in not this coming Monday, but a week from this Monday. The resolution that I presented had to do with the change in modality that could happen in the middle of a semester, so that a student calling a professor, telling a professor that they're tested positive, asking for how they can fulfill the requirements while they're in quarantine. The instructor was not informed by the Champaign-Urbana Public Health District. The instructor is not informed about any further contact tracing that may have been taking place in the classroom. The instructor is simply left on his or her own to make a decision as to whether or not the students are safe and he or she is safe. And in that context, it seemed to me the appropriate responsibility lay with the instructor to determine whether to go to Zoom for 1 or 2 classes or not. That was the resolution I brought forward. It seems to have gotten a lot of good feedback from the Education Policy Committee, from other committees of the Senate. And what I basically will propose is that there be a committee formed to actually investigate the best practices regarding contact tracing in classrooms. One of the answers I would want to give to the journalists concerned about the question of where we stand in relation to other universities, we are doing an absolutely miserable job at contact tracing in our classrooms. So in effect, we're not doing it. The Champaign-Urbana Public Health District has said that it asks students whether or not they were in close contact with others, but that is usually in relation, and pretty much only in relation, to social contacts and residence hall or dormant or apartment contacts. They absolutely do nothing in relation to the classroom. And because they do nothing, the classrooms are completely without care in terms of how we are protected or not. So the provost says, we have no evidence, and it's very careful, read the statement he makes. We have no evidence of classroom transmission. And he means that quite literally. We do not have evidence of it because we are not taking any evidence for it. We have not gathered evidence about it. There is no evidence about what classrooms are or are not vectors for the transmission of disease. So it is absolutely true to say we have no evidence of classroom transmission because we have not gathered that evidence. So I remind all of you that, of course, a principle of all science is the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. And so we need to change our classroom contact tracing procedures. And I would encourage those of you who are journalists to take a look at our campus in Chicago. The University of Illinois at Chicago does its own in-house contact tracing of students, has a tremendously robust system for maintaining knowledge of who is sitting next to whom, using classroom cheating charts and so on. They do tremendous work at their contact tracing throughout all of the campus contacts that are made in classrooms. They know which classroom was a vector, which classroom tested positive, which classes tested positive, where students were, how close they were, and so forth. And they do that with their own in-house testing. We need to get closer to and approximate the University of Illinois at Chicago's system. If you look at their dashboard, they are at 0. For a long time at 0. So I recommend that we aspire to the kind of thing that is happening at our sister campus in Chicago.
Why do you think it's so much better there than UIUC is the flagship, right? So yeah, why is it better there?
It's better there, and the numbers prove that it's better, is because they use all of the mitigation that we do, obviously, masking, mandated vaccination. They have a student population that is, many of them live off campus, live at home, and that would expose them to even greater dangers, but their risks are lowered by virtue of the nature of the testing that they're required to do when a student tests positive in a classroom. The entire classroom is told to test, the entire classroom. If it's under 30 students, they just say, everyone in this classroom test. And if there's a test that's positive, then they go to Zoom if that's the modality that is most effective. In other words, they have added a significant and very important layer, which is classroom contact tracing. And that has produced a much better result for them than we're able to produce here.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I see, Leslie, you have your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that briefly, that through some research the impact bargaining team did, we found out that the Safer Illinois app, which is what the university recommends for contact tracing, only notifies people if the person who tests positive is also using the app and has the contact tracing on, first of all. But then it only tells you if you've been exposed if you spent 2 hours close to somebody who has COVID, which means that most classes are not getting notified if they're exposed. And the university consistently says, oh, CU Public Health is taking care of contact tracing. And as several people have mentioned, that is not effective and not working. We have also heard from them that they are not notifying anyone if they've been exposed, if that person is vaccinated. So basically we have this huge gap of people being around each other for under 2 hours and who are vaccinated, they're just not being told. So UIUC, for whatever reason, has basically decided that this huge gap in exposure notification is okay.
Thank you, Leslie. We wanted to sort of open. We can continue to have questions from media that are on the call, but we also wanted to open it up more broadly for other people on the call who have comments, who have questions, who have stories or experiences that they want to share. You can raise your hand if you go to reactions, and then click the raise hand button, and that will put you in the list of speakers. So I see Ethan. Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah. By the way, I'm from the News Gazette. I'm the campus reporter there, but Bruce, I don't know if you're still in the call, but I wanted to talk about, you proposed or are going to propose an assigned seating pattern to assist with contact tracers, because a lot of the, we were talking about a couple weeks ago, a lot of the current contact tracing methods rely on student memory to see who they were sitting next to, or if there was, a classroom exposure. Basically, you oftentimes will not know who is next to you. And so I wanted to ask you if you wanted to sort of talk about that proposal, and then also open it up to the floor and see what folks in this call thought about that, about assigned seating and how it would be feasible in your own classroom.
Yes, I mentioned it in my Senate resolution. There is a reference to assigned seating as an option that we might encourage faculty to, and instructors in general, to use. It is being used over at the University of Illinois at Chicago. My recommendation will ultimately be, however, a more general one, that the Senate form an ad hoc committee to investigate best practices and make recommendations, and possibly encourage the participation of the McKinley Health Center in contact tracing with CUPHD. So it is part of my recommendation, and it will come before the Senate. I hope it's going to be supported by the great majority of the Senate. I think it will be, in fact, very popular in the Senate.
Thank you, Bruce. Is anybody else?
David, there's another, now there was one more question from Francie about theory versus practice. And I mean, the thing that I would just add to that for sure is in theory, nobody gets into the buildings if they, if they're not doing the testing right or don't have the vaccination, and the reality of like mass chaos and just like, no, I mean, it's like stampedes. There's no rhyme or reason to who gets in or who doesn't. Do other folks have any other thoughts about difference between theory and practice? Like, I mean, I would say the other general one is like, one of the provost emails, one of the things that provost will say repeatedly is, of course, not asymptomatic, breakthrough cases are bound to happen. And I think the theory there is it's just understood to be that's the case and it's not a big deal. And then the reality, for someone like me with a kid at home is like, that's actually kind of a big deal. So yeah, but it's a great question. I mean, do other people have thoughts about that, theory versus reality, theory versus practice, right? The gaps between how UIUC's current COVID policies work in theory versus practice.
Yeah, I could speak to that. In bargaining, the university very much likes to say that they're following the numbers and they're following the science, and numbers and science are fantastic. However, they choose to read these in a specific way. So for example, not a lot of people know that there were over 6,000 cases of COVID on campus last year. If memory serves, like 13% of undergrads got COVID. We don't talk about that. And as I'm hearing from another member in this call, we know that vaccines are not 100% effective. We have breakthrough cases, certainly, and if they're asymptomatic, if they're not being told that they were exposed and they might need to test, a lot of people are not testing, which means, as Professor Rosenstock said, we just don't have the information. So the university, their practice is very often based on the data they provide for us and the data they do not provide for us. And they refuse basically to take responsibility for the risks that we take of like long hauler COVID, even just being absent from class for a week or two. Like these are all really damaging, difficult things to experience during a semester and during our time here. And the university is just not concerned with the actual realities of what's happening.
Thank you, Leslie. I wanted to read a few of the comments in the chat for those who haven't been able to follow it as well. Teresa Barnes said, I would also note that our campus workers, cleaners, facilities and services, etc., must still have tremendously unstable and uncertain public health working conditions, even in the face of what we've been talking about. Thank you, Teresa. Sean Gilmore also said, provided a bit of context for the potential Senate action, and sort of says that that the provost's office has been fairly bold in asserting that it has the power to determine the modality standards around a class, whether it has to be online or in person or things like that, over the deans and department level heads or chairs, so that the provost has the ability to make these decisions. Also, Austin Hoffman said, I teach in one of the largest buildings on campus, and there have been WSAs or door checkers maybe 5 times all semester. Also, I've seen students simply refusing to wear masks or wearing them improperly. No one is holding them accountable. I've got one more question in the chat here. When it comes to contact tracing, the university has continued to maintain that it's up to the CPHT. How does this contrast with UIC, and why is it that they're doing their in-house tracing? Can anybody speak to that? Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
It seems I need to keep on returning to this point, and I'll say it. It's really an important point. It is the case that the University of Illinois at Chicago has an in-house contact tracing team of 33 students who are trained through the School of Public Health. Other universities also have in-house contact tracers. University of Washington, Brown, Yale, Emory, all of them have either through their School of Public Health or through an internal like our McKinley Health Center. It is possible for us to do the same. The numbers are very low of positive tested students. And if we only did the contact tracing in classrooms, it would be very easy for us to handle that responsibility. The question why we have handed it over to the CUPHD is a very good question. And I have been asking Provost Congelaris this. I asked him at the last Senate meeting and he refused to answer the question. I've never gotten a clear answer to that question.
Thank you, Bruce. Let's see, I've got Brienne who wants to speak.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the difference between theory and practice on the campus, because as Leslie has pointed out, the theory is being determined by the administration, but the administration is also determining how that theory gets put into practice. And the problem with that is that they have, on multiple occasions, as evidenced by our bargaining sessions, administration has refused to take into account the experiences and the input of basically anyone on the front lines who's actually doing teaching or in a classroom setting. These decisions are predominantly being made by individuals in administration who don't have to teach classes who don't have to be in rooms, in small rooms with large numbers of students, who are able to conduct their business online or however they choose. And when they're informed of the realities of what it's like to actually be teaching, to be put in these unsafe situations, our realities are basically getting denied. That is what I wanted to add.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to add something about this?
Yeah, just another theory reality that I remember one of my friends on the first day of class, he was teaching and one of his students had like an asthma attack. And he this student was like in pain, coughing on the floor. Everybody like scatters and doesn't want to be anywhere near them, doesn't want to help the student. And it just, for me, it really embodies sort of the difference between theory and practice. It's just like that kind of thing happens. And I don't think it's, trying to have a comfortable class setting is very challenging. And I will also just say that like, I'm still teaching one of my classes in person. I'm so glad to be teaching in person. It took a lot to get the right size classroom and it still is not comfortable, but yeah, there's just these kind of things happen, I think, all the time. And I don't think they did a great job gaming the numbers for last year and with all this modeling. And I don't know, sort of the chaos of everyday life this year is something that I don't think they accounted for at all.
I know folks have talked about this a lot, but it would be helpful if we could go over again to what extent, if you want to teach online, how, can you do that? Can you not do that? Yeah.
I can take it, I guess, and I guess we should take this by different cohort because there's tenure stream, non-tenure stream and grad. I'll just do it for tenure stream. Last spring, I think when we chose our courses, we were encouraged very heavily to teach in person, but I think there was some flexibility with teaching online. I have a big class, like a very big lecture that I understood I couldn't teach in person. And so that's online and it's being recorded. But there was some flexibility. And then it really was pretty chaotic in our neck of the woods. It was first that we had to go through our department head, and then it was no, don't go through the department head. And now there's this kind of vague and I would say like slightly ominous process where if you want to teach online next year, you have to, and this was in italics in the provost message, you have to show your unique situation. So you have to get a waiver now for sure. And to do it in the middle of the semester, we're not supposed to do that at all. And again, there's this presumption that faculty want to teach online because it's easier and, it's it is so much more work and it is such a miserable experience. Yeah. So right now they're increasingly saying, no, you can't do it. We've had some flexibility though. And last year we had a lot of flexibility. It was, I think, the way it should be. Yeah, let's see if others from the other representative groups from GEO and NTFC have thoughts and can share how it works for you all.
Go ahead, Brian. Did you want to speak to this? Or?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier and what my colleague, fellow graduate student, Izzy Marquez said earlier. We have not been allowed to teach online. It has been denied to us. Izzy actually went through, as she said, the very difficult and dehumanizing process of applying for permission to teach online, and she was flat out denied after an extended process. The remainder of students I know who are teaching, graduate students I know who are teaching classes, have been told that they cannot move their classes online, or that they can only do so in very limited circumstances, such as for a day after someone in class tests positive. But there is no, but in terms of the official university policy, or at least what our college policy has been, we have been told that we can't move classes online.
Thanks. Leslie, can you also touch on the question in the chat too, if you can, with regard to this?
Sure. Willie's question or Amanda's?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I will definitely second what Brian said. And I will, so Willie's question is, I've heard that departments have been given vague information that the power to change modalities temporarily is actually with the colleges. Is that accurate? In my department, it's gone back and forth so many times, who has the power, who can do what. In fact, my department has tried very hard to provide as much flexibility as possible, and then they get told by the college, no, you can't actually do that. And so it's often unclear and it changes a lot. But I wanted to point out, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I will also point out with regard to Willie's question that when our workers started getting exposed to COVID in their classrooms, the university had no plan. There was obviously like no guidance, there was nothing. And so people were contacting their unions and going, hey, I've been exposed to COVID, what am I supposed to do? Can I take my class online? Should I tell my students? And we had no direction on that. And so people had to make their own decisions. And then we got a lot of direction that was like, oh, everything you did to protect your student safety was actually wrong and we don't like that. So the university didn't seem to have a good plan or to have thought through what would happen when exposures happened. But I will also point out that there is actually a process for workers who have a documented disability or illness to request to work online through the ADA office at UIUC, which is fantastic. The challenge is that if somebody has unvaccinated children at home, if somebody has a roommate who's immunocompromised, if somebody has a family member going through cancer treatment, we cannot get exceptions based on that. There's no mechanism from that. And so it seems very much up to how sympathetic it seems like a dean in a particular college feels at any given moment.
Sean, did you, this was your comment was about this earlier.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing about this. I dropped a comment in the chat about this previously. The current standard is that there's been some confusion about what overall modality changes need which authorizations. And I think it's in part because this question has never really been asked. Like, how does the campus all change at once? And within colleges, how do things change? Leslie is completely right. There has been much confusion about whether the colleges can mandate departments to do something or each department can have its own standards. In the confusion over this, the provost's office has decided it has the power to issue some blanket standards. I am not completely convinced they actually have that power, but that is what they have done. They have carved out some legal protections, including ADA and those sorts of things, which is, of course, what they must do. I hope that we resolve this or figure out that gap there, but in the absence of that gap, the provost's office is acting as though it can do this as a blanket system.
Can I jump in? I know that there might be someone else with a hand. Can I jump in and say something about this?
Sure.
So I have actually heard from a dean that there is a dean in the College of LAS that it is up to faculty to inform their head or chair if they want to make a temporary move of modality, and that it is in their power to do so. Now, that is tremendously confusing because we get something, as Sean just mentioned, from the provost saying that is not in anybody's power to do. But I have heard directly from a dean in the College of LAS that we have that power. And it isn't only in relation to COVID. If I sprain my ankle, I know a faculty member, a colleague of mine, sprained her ankle. and said to her class, I can't come to class. I need to be able to do this over Zoom, and did it over Zoom, informed her head. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what she did. She is within her rights to do that. So it is really confusing to get the provost making these blanket statements. And I thank Sean so much for bringing it to our attention that it may not be within his power to make these kinds of interventions at college and indeed at departmental levels.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Sean and Leslie and everybody. I know that we're hitting our time here, so I wanted to thank everyone who shared stories this afternoon about their experiences. And
David,
to draw
real quick, I'm really sorry. I just don't want it to get lost that Zach and Terry Barnes had just if people take a look at the chat before you leave, I think it's really useful trying to do both modalities at once. So I don't want those comments to get lost out.
Yeah, thanks. There's some really great comments in the chat about the challenges of doing two modalities at once, the strain on McKinley that's caused by all of the issues with COVID that we've been talking about. So thanks again to everyone who shared their story, and to all of you for attending. And in the chat, you can also find messages by Andy about how you can share your experience or opinion with the administration. We have a link there that you can hit to share, to find a template for emailing the administration to share your thoughts, as well as links to the NTFC, the GEO, the CFA, if you want to find out about more of the work of these organizations. Thanks again for those who have to leave, and we can stick around for a few more minutes for any lingering questions. Yes, you can also download the transcript, as Andy said, if you want to access this.
Do folks have like a preferred way for me to get in contact with them if I have follow-up questions? I mean, I can always just Google people and find their college emails. That's what you usually do. But if there's something else that I should be doing instead,
that would be fine.
Did you have something?
Unless you can email for everybody, right, David? Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it? We can. Why don't folks put your put your email in the chat? It will make people's jobs easier. If you
Amanda, who had to leave to go teach, Amanda from NTFC put her email in the chat. It's a little bit farther up. I'll bring it back down for if you missed it. Yeah. Great. Did you have something, Ethan? An issue?
Yeah, I did. I just had a couple more questions if anyone wants to stick around or still has some time to answer them. I mean, is it okay if I go for it, David or Mark? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I was wondering, I have a couple things. So obviously October 15th, I believe is the date that the U of I gave in terms of when it's going to start issuing discipline and really cracking down on people that are either not staying up with the testing regimen or have not gotten vaccinated and they still haven't gotten an approved exemption. Basically, they gave a month from that mandate. And but as far as I know, last I checked, there's about 92% student vaccination and about 88%, a little bit less than 90% campus-wide vaccination rate. And so my questions are, when the U of I starts doing this discipline, how would you guys like to see this handled? And then the second part is, there's obviously locally this perception of the U of I as this sort of beacon of COVID safety. And with these vaccination rates, I guess, how would you communicate to the layperson in Champaign-Urbana that there are still these concerns? How would you kind of synthesize some of the stuff you said today about why the U of I should do more, or there's more that can be done?
I'll jump in for both questions. I think that we have a tendency to be overzealous in our prosecution of students, and sometimes our reactions are a little too much justice and a little too little mercy. So although I find it tremendously dangerous for a student to overlook a test, I think that we have a tendency to immediately place all the blame on the students. We have a responsibility as an institution, as administrators, those who are administrators, to bear the entire burden, essentially. and not to blame our students. We did a lot of blaming of students last year, I think. And I think that what we need to do is to create a climate where everyone is trustworthy. And we are unfortunately in a climate where the administrators are not trustworthy. They have failed to make all of us feel that we are living in a safe environment. And I think that when they then throw the burden on the student, it's a way of, as it were, saying it's not our fault, it was their fault all along. It happened at the beginning of last year as well, when we started rising in numbers. The predicted was 600, the prediction, 600 students all year are going to test positive. Within a week, that was already becoming false. And we rose to 6,000 and we blamed the students. It wasn't the fault of our administrators, it was the students who failed to follow our instructions. Well, I think that we have a tendency to do that, and I hope we don't do it when we begin to punish our students. The other point, I think, what was the second point you asked? What about?
Well, it's basically, I mean, I think
I
can jump in, Bruce, if you want. Yeah, I could.
What the message to the community?
Sure.
You know, I think that the message to the community is that we are doing our level best to keep the community safe. And that one of the most important ways to do so is to make sure that breakthrough cases don't spread out to the community. The most endangered group in the community are the ones who are not vaccinated. And we're at 50% or around that in the community. And when students are walking around with breakthrough cases, which are not getting tested, and they're walking into businesses, into bars, into restaurants, and they're passing it to the community, that's dangerous. And we're not doing what we ought to be doing for the community. And I feel that the message from this group is we need to do more. We need to step up and become a world-class leader in protecting not just ourselves and our students, but our community. And I think we're failing at that.
I was just going to, Mark. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ethan, and thank you for the reporting you've been doing on this. It's really,
yes,
appreciate it. So just the synthesis question, I'll just address that. I think, there's been a sort of joke, but metaphor going around, among a lot of faculty when they started handing out medals, like literally handing out medals for, for how well we did last year. And it's great. People have done amazing things. We should be proud. But I think a lot of people, the comparison was to when George W. Bush landed on the, parachuted onto the aircraft carrier and said mission accomplished, and there were still years of war ahead. I mean, it feels a little bit like that, like mission accomplished. And yeah, we've done some great things, but like, have you noticed the pandemic is still going on? That's how I would synthesize it very quickly for folks outside.
Leslie, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. In a bargaining session with the administration, we were told that they were sort of like, wow, we can't believe that this union has any complaints. We're safer than going out to the mall. We're safer than being part of the community. And I did want to point out that, yes, we're safer. And part of the reason we're safer is because unions and undergrad organizations and faculty organizations have worked really hard and done a lot of advocacy and protesting to make sure that we're safe. And so I think that, like, yes, we might have higher vaccination rates and lower rates of infection, which is fantastic. But we also have a responsibility as community members and as workers to take care of each other. And so whenever one of my friends, grad workers, comes down with COVID, it's still a problem for me, even if it's not all, 100 of my friends. It's still a friend who is at risk.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie and Mark and Brienne and Bruce. Thank you, everybody. So I think thank you everyone also for staying on a little bit past our time to share more of your experiences and questions. There in the chat you can find emails for a lot of the folks who spoke. As well as emails for some of the for GEO, Campus Faculty Association, NTFC, et cetera, for the reporters, if you want to follow up. And for the UIUC folks on the call, again, you can find ways to, if you want to share your story through email to the administration or to the organizations, there's information in the chat there too for how you can do that. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming and for sharing. And